What is up? Welcome to the Smalley Talk podcast. This is your host, Josh Shrinko. Recording during the workday. A little risky business got going on here. But I got my boy Drew Gregory
Call
on
your
the
boss.
line.
Call on your boss. He's not
Yeah.
working.
What's up, Drew? How's it going, brother?
Oh, pretty good, man. Just just slam busy in the middle of the season still for fishing world, and got this
hmm
upcoming kayak adventure series event about to head up to and I'll see you there in Wisconsin. So excited about that. And man, I'll be honest with you, I'm more excited about this conversation because I do so many podcasts that are kind of just like recapping the last tournament and then what we need to tell everybody for the next tournament, all this stuff. We've kind of lost. It's one thing I've missed about the podcast world for myself and for the kayak adventure series. We don't get into like this kind of stuff. There's like juicy topics with the good info, that
Yeah,
we're going to get into today.
I
So
know. And I thought it was appropriate. I kind of we were talking for quite a long time before this podcast started. So I was telling you how I like can't get like fishing out of my brain,
yeah,
which I'm sure a lot of our listeners and yourself struggle with the same thing. But one of the things I think about is like, hey, what can we talk about in the podcast? And I had this, I've mentioned it in a couple different previous podcasts that I had this recorded, and basically just like, hey, I've been, doing the kayak tournament thing for about a decade. I fished boat tournaments all kind of through high school. So I have like a pretty long track record of, fishing just tournaments in general. And I was like, I've learned a lot of things over the past, probably I would say I've hit my stride the last like 4 or 5 years of like, hey, I got a little bit of a system down. I'm not just
mm-hmm.
doing this willy nilly. And I think there's some really good, um, just principles that I sort of abide by with my tournament fishing, that I'm like, this would really benefit some people. And then I was like, you know what? It would be better to bring someone on that has,
Yeah,
a better track record than me, that has been on more of a national stage, that could kind of feed off of that. So I think we came up with like, Drew and I are going to do kind of 10 things that will make you a better tournament angler. And I would like to, first we'll talk about the Wisconsin River Fest, but I think this is a great time if you're driving up to fish the Kayak Adventure Series or whatever else, Hobie or Bassmaster they got going on. Like, I think a lot of
mm-hmm.
guys scour the podcast, their podcast feed for this kind of stuff. This is a great way to improve your game while you're driving, going to the tournament. If you guys are
Yep.
going to Wisconsin River Fest, this would be a great one to listen to on the way. So yeah, looking forward
For sure, man.
to
Yeah,
talking about it.
I mean, if you want to throw that graphic up there, we'll hit it real quick and move on to the real juice. But yeah, this is going to come out before that event. So we want to remind you guys that Wisconsin River Fest is September 6th and 7th, part of the Kayak Adventure Series presented by GoPro. It's going to be a ton of fun. We got some big, I mean, obviously you're going to be there. I'll be there. We'll have Jeff Little, Christine Fisher doing seminars with us at the Bass U Brunch on that Friday morning. But if you've never been to a Kayak Adventure Series tournament, it is nothing. It's not like anything you've ever fished before. It's definitely a different format, different rule set. We're trying to be very different from what's already out there. Of course, no need to just reinvent the wheel. So it's always an adventure, man. It's going to be a fun one up there. Some huge largemouth and smallmouth up in that area. So I think smallmouth are really what most people are thinking about when they go that far north in those kind of waters, and obviously listeners of this podcast. But yeah, we will hopefully
Mhm.
see you guys there. And then our brood stock, our finale, is actually a month later after this one in the beginning of October. So don't forget that, because we're going to have around $40,000 of prizes alone, not counting all your cash that you guys enter that we pay back out at that one. And that's at the going to be held at the National Corvette Museum. Did you hear about that yet, or know that we're at our host
No,
headquarters is
I
the
mean,
National Corvette Museum in
I
Bowling
know,
Green,
I know
Kentucky
that's
for
in
that one.
Bowling Green.
Yeah,
I've
dude,
lived
you pass it.
in the Midwest my whole life. That's I've always
Yep.
known about that. So
And then we rented out the motorsports park across the street. So for opening ceremonies and the after party on Saturday, and so we have those go karts and stuff where you guys just drive on us on Kayak Adventure Series for a couple hours, a rooftop bar, food, It's
Pretty
going to be
sick.
pretty sick, dude. And you can actually pay the money to do the actual Corvette experience if you wanted to on the road course they have there as well. I think it might be like $400. We'll see, but that's gonna be a fun event. So those two are the last two, and then we'll go start 2025 season. So we'll hopefully see some of you guys up there at that event. But if you do look at that event, that broodstock, Josh, one thing that there was the curveball when we just threw the eligible water up there on the website. There is
Mhm.
obviously all the lakes and rivers, the Nolan Lake, the Barron River Lake, all the Green River, the Barron River, all the creeks that feed into it. Great, huge fish, good times. But we threw in this wildlife management area called the Peabody WMA. It's like old strip pits. It's like all these lakes, ponds. You got to sometimes, most of them have a road that goes to it with a light trailerable boat can launch their primitive, ramp and stuff. But that's a big like curveball just thrown into the mix. Like, okay, now we got all these random lakes and ponds, strip, pit areas that could come into place. We'll see. Should be fun to see how it
Yeah,
all
man.
shakes out.
That I'm not sure what my schedule's looking like for that. I have to sell it to the wife, but
Oh yeah,
we'll
always.
we'll see how that works out. I I will say this, and I've mentioned briefly on the podcast on about my experience with the kayak adventure series, and
Yeah.
um, I'm gonna give it my little elevator pitch here, and this is coming from in my, I hope you guys know by now, like I'm not like out here trying to, you know, give you some fake sales pitch about something. I've had experience on the local level fishing a lot of tournaments. I've had experience, in the Bassmaster, the Hobie BOS, and then now with the Kayak Adventure Series. And when Drew kind of came to me about it, um, Drew is like, if you guys meet him, he's dude, full of energy, full of ideas. Like he just like nonstop, like it's how he fishes, kind of the
Yep.
same,
Exactly.
just like dude's all, all energy all the time. But he's like, tell me about this. I'm like, dude, this is really cool. I had my doubts on how executable that all those sort of concepts were. And the first one I went to in Michigan, um, I was like, dude, this is like he pulled it off. Like he really
Yeah.
made this what he wanted it to be. And I think it's cool now because even I'm sure you probably want more people there, but like there was enough people there where I felt like it was like what you wanted to be. It was like a
Mm-hmm.
party, it was like a festival. And dude, I'm telling you, man, like when I first got into kayak fishing, like that's what was fun for me is like the local camaraderie, the local sort of get in the, in the gazebo and like everybody had a pitch in and like it was like a community. We've sort of lost that a little bit. Like even at the local level,
Mm-hmm.
there's everything's virtual. Yeah, the last tournament I fished, the awards are on Facebook. Nobody even like it was just kind of lame. I was like, man, this is like and part of it is because it's saturated. There's a lot of stuff. You've really kind of brought that back on a national level.
Yeah, trying to, man. Like the old boondoggles and stuff like that we used to do
Yeah,
the
yeah,
get-togethers and yeah, and
yeah,
I don't think the fact that we've got those seminars and we've got the cool theater experience. We hold the awards and we finish on Saturday, which keeps people there because they can drive home on Sunday. The whole thing is like had to be laid out just perfectly for the people to be there and stay there and you know Thursday's opening ceremony is a good example. It's like, oh, we can we don't can't fish Friday, can't pre-fish. We just can only start fishing in the afternoon for our afternoon sesh. So it takes that weight off your shoulders to I don't have to wake up twice super early at 3, 4 in the morning, just one day, on Saturday morning. And B, because it gives us the chance to like, oh, we can just hang out and fellowship all night long. I don't have to go back, get ready because I have to get up early in the morning. No, we're going to go to
yeah.
the brunch the next morning. So we're going to like, let's hang out till 1. We're at Wisconsin River Fest. Guess what we're going to do on Thursday? I bet you can guess this. Thursday night,
On
September
Thursday,
5th.
I
What do
know
you think
I'm
we're
gonna
going to
be
do?
partying, dude. I don't know.
You should know this, dude. That's the first NFL game. We're
Oh,
going to
okay,
be
I
at
gotcha.
Vintage
I should know
Brewing,
that.
the brewery where we do our check-in registration, the opening ceremonies. Vintage Brewery, right on the Wisconsin River, the most beautiful view of that river. It's gigantic. It's
That'll be
huge. They
sick.
got TVs everywhere. We're staying, watching that entire, I think it's like Chiefs Ravens. Is that right? Chiefs Ravens game.
I haven't even paid attention. I'm
So
a
I
diehard
think it
Colts
is.
fan, and I
Yeah.
specifically was like, all right, when's the Colts game? Because like if I in your little, your Friday Saturday things playing into this, I can be
Yeah.
home to watch the game. So
That's right. Exactly. You can be home on Sunday to watch the game. And Friday there's a game too. I think is it Packers and Eagles. So we'll be watching football there. Well, Friday's gonna be tough. You guys are gonna be getting ready for Saturday morning early wake up. But I'll be watching the
yeah,
game and it's gonna be a fun time
I'll
up there.
watch it.
So
I don't care. I mean, that's one thing I will say. It was much more laid back. It was much more of
yeah,
a. It was much more of a. I don't know, man. There were
it's like
kids there. There were a lot of husband and
yeah,
wives there. Like the Bassmaster thing. While I think Bassmaster is, I think at this point it's probably the standard for kayak fishing. It's kind of like what
mhm,
everybody's the bar that's been set, but it's very much in line with like their Bassmaster boat tournaments. Like there's not a lot of games. Like it's like pretty
yeah,
serious stuff, and the most
yeah,
interaction I had people was either at the house or at check-in, and it was like really rushed,
minimal. Yeah,
um,
yeah. I mean, it's
yeah,
the elite series. It's like when you ever get to any sport at the highest level. Let's face it. PGA Tour golfers aren't out there partying until 1 a.m. hanging out, fellowship, and they got a tea time the next morning. It's all business. So when you get the highest level of entry fees, and that's the way it should be at that highest competitive level that you and I love to fish. There's fun in that too. You know what I'm saying? And you know, Kayak Adventure Series is still very competitive, but it's not, at that level, doesn't have that entry fee, doesn't have that feel. And that's what we're trying to kind of
it's
keep.
good in
Yeah.
between, but
In between.
we're
Yeah.
gonna have to we're not
Yep.
gonna we can't let Parker pull a three-peat here, bud. So,
Yeah.
so
You guys,
I felt I didn't fish the one in Michigan. I'm like, yeah, we're coming back. We're gonna make some noise at this one. Which there's some, Christine's in it, Jeff
yeah.
fishing,
Jordan Westerman's a hammer. He
Yep,
won, I think, a Hobie earlier this year. Has always been
yep,
up there. John Dalton will be there. So
yep.
he's
There'll
coming
be
up from
some like
Georgia.
there's some
Yeah.
sticks, no
There,
doubt.
there are
Um,
for
I
sure.
have I have no doubt about that. But all right, let's get into this topic here. And if you haven't signed up for that, go sign up. I'm signed up. There's a team division and an individual division, and I'm doing both. So it should be a good time. I'm not signed up for the micro bass division, just not my
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah, right. But you and Jeff are together on the team, right? You and Jeff Little, so that'll
yeah,
be fun. So we'll
yeah,
see.
yeah,
Two-man
yeah.
team is
That'll
another
be a good time.
differentiator. I love it. But yeah,
Yeah,
let's get into it, man.
yeah.
What should we start with?
Yeah, so 10 things that will help you become a better tournament angler. And like I said, I'm not going to even specify this for kayak tournaments. I think this is applicable to any tournament that you fish.
Yeah.
Especially if you're fishing like a Bassmaster Open or a BLF, or like any of those kind of like ones where it's like, hey, I'm putting a big entry fee out, like I'm going to spend time and practice. Or if you have a local tournament that's you
Mhm.
take seriously, I think these all apply, besides maybe like a Wednesday night derby sort of thing.
Right.
Like this is more of like, hey, I'm traveling or this tournament's really important to me. I think these are the kind of things that I apply to those tournaments. So I'll start with mine. We each have
Right.
5. I'll start with my first one, and then we can kind of go through and alternate. But
All right.
um, so my first one is have a plan. So, and what I mean by that is,
Yeah,
you
do
know,
tell, because have a plan is pretty.
yeah, have a
Oh, well, you
plan.
want us to have a plan, Josh? Well, thank God I tuned into the Smalley Talk podcast. I should have a
Yeah,
plan when I go to a
yeah.
tournament. Wow. Thanks,
These are
buddy.
bullet points. Um, so what I mean by that is leading up to a tournament, like, I'm constantly thinking about like, what I'm going to do, that sort of thing. But then you end up, I think it's probably around that like 2 to 3 week mark before the tournament, you really start like, okay, like the conditions, you're starting to see some weather forecasts that are leading into it. You can look at water levels. You can look at some like relevant
Right.
sort of things that are going on. And my goal, like a lot of guys, you always hear map study is like a hot button word, like people say.
Right.
I definitely think map study is good. Using Google Earth Pro specifically on your laptop or desktop, that's a powerful tool. But without going into the gory details of it, this is what I like to establish prior to the tournament is when I start on, let's say, let's say I'm practicing for 2 days. Let's say that I'm practicing on Wednesday, Thursday. I want to have a very light sketched out outline of one, where I'm going to start, and have some like pins set that I'm like, okay, I want to go look or float or fish like 5 areas in that day, and kind of just like have where you're not just like showing up and just being like, well, this ramp looks okay, and just showing up and like going
Mm,
exploring. Does that work sometimes? Sure. And does your plan ever play out the way you think it will? Most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time
right.
it's a fluid thing. So you're like, I'm going to
Yeah.
start here, and then if I see this, I want to go check out that. Um, so the plan isn't necessarily in concrete, it's in clay. You're sort of like molding it as you go along. But I feel comfortable looking at like, okay, I'm purposefully tying these presentations on each of my rods. I'm going out there, and I have a, kind of a sketch out for the first day of practice. I want to hit this place, this place, this place, this place. And I will say this, doing a fishing fun and going out there and just like, oh, I'm just going to fish and try to catch fish. Like, you can do that, but that is the opposite of having a plan in my
Yeah.
mind. It's like, I'm just going to go out there and fish. And to a certain extent, you do have to do that, but having sort of a methodical way of like, okay, I'm going to go check this place out. And one of the things that and I'll talk about this in my next point, but one of the things that I always like, the first place that I want to go is always, if you put a gun in my head and you said, hey, where are you going to fish a tournament if you had to fish it tomorrow? The first place I practice is the place where I think I'm going to fish the tournament.
Right. Yep.
The reason I do that is because if I hook a couple big fish, I want there to be the maximum amount of time
Yep.
between when I practice and hook those fish to when I actually fish the tournament, so it gives them a
Hmm.
chance to reload. And that's
Exactly.
usually 2 or 3 days. Um, so yeah, what do you think about that?
I mean, it's a great starting one for sure. I mean, having that plan. I mean, a lot of people they have the plan, and then so I'll just add this caveat: is most people have a hard time sticking to it. Like in other words, they get out there and they don't look at their phone or their fish finder or whatever anymore to see the rest of their pins. Or I want to check out this, and this from this one launch, and they just start fishing and they just look at it and they just kind of keep fishing and they don't really go back to what made them drop those pins. They lose sight of that, and then they also just fun fish their way around and keep fishing and don't quit. Soon enough after they catch a couple fish, they just keep having a good time. Oh, we're catching fish. It's fun. I get it, but like you said, I mean, you want to just catch one or two and then get out. First of all, if you catch big ones, but anyway, they just don't stick to even the plan that they they make, and they get distracted. Then 2-3 days of practice is over and they really never even got to all the area of the all their plan that they did have, and could have cost them, like, for sure could, because there's a reason why they made those pins originally on there. It's part of something they want to see, and I like to try to make sure I get to it all if I can,
Yeah.
if I
And
can.
I mean, like, I've heard you say this multiple times, like, a kayak angler's outboard is their car.
Yeah.
Like like,
Yep.
and if you're putting in at one spot and, like, spending all your time in one area, like, yeah, you're gonna eventually get to different looking areas if you just motor up or float down or whatever. But in a lake or a river, like, if you are able to drive, 12, 13, 20 miles to another side of the lake, you're experiencing a completely different
Yeah.
environment than where you were previously. So you're sort of eliminating things more than anything. You're kind of like this is where I think would be good, but you fish for 2 hours and you only catch two dinks, like that's probably strike that off the list. I'm not going to do that on tournament day. Let's go try another thing. Or you have success, and you're like, hey, there's something to this. I'm going to sort of put it in my, notebook as like possibility. And then what usually happens for me is eventually you hit something where you're like, this is it. This is the
Mm-hmm.
area. This is the technique. I
Yep.
had an immediate like success on this. I caught two or three good ones, backed off of it. Like I have, and the biggest thing is like having confidence on the first morning that you fish. If you have that like confidence and have options to like, I usually have a plan A, plan B, plan C on tournament
Mm-hmm.
day. So if plan A is like somebody's on my spot or whatever, I have some way to sort of pivot. But
Yeah.
um
No, that's good.
but
It's good.
yeah, putting in the work, planning, I think a lot of guys might have a plan, but it's like very loose and they don't put a lot of work into it. And that's, I think, the guys that are good, the guys that are on the elite series, all that sort of thing, those guys are putting a ton of off the water time in.
Yeah.
Like they just are.
And
So
that kind of actually leads into like the one I'll start. I was debating which one to start with, but I'll leave with this one because it fits. So the ones who are more experienced, like you're saying, like my plan of attack now, like I could probably, and I most likely do, like you said, the gun to your head thing. The first place, the most likely spot I feel like I'm going to find big fish and catch big fish, my 1A for practice is usually where I end up going. But it wasn't always like that. And why? It wasn't always like that because this is my first point. Learn how to learn yourself. And the example is one time on satellite image in Florida, it it looked like a bunch of lily pads, right, in this area. And there were lily pads. And I went there and I actually did this in tournament day. I went down this creek, I got dropped off and went down, was trying to float from one bridge to the next, from one lake to the next. And it turns out the satellite image, you got me? I'm kind of breaking up here.
yeah,
You still
you're
got me?
recording. Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. It's all good though.
All right.
We'll be able to get your
Yeah.
individual recordings. So
Get local recording.
yeah.
But anyway, the satellite image, it turns out, was there was hyacinth there with the lily pads. And unfortunately for me, I got stuck. I kept trying to push through it and get through it to different open areas, but it was just choked with hyacinth. But now I learned what hyacinth looks like on satellite. You see what I'm saying? So like I know I've learned something from that experience. You have to have this like pin all these spots and have your plan and then go fish tournaments and go drive and paddle and motor to all those spots and fish them. And then you kind of have in your head, okay, well now I know what this and this was good and here's why. And then kind of go back and do that process so many times. You know what I mean? Like where you actually pinned it, it looks good on the map, go and do it in person, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until you actually now I'm so good at it that I know like I know what stuff is not good just because from the satellite image, and I know what stuff most likely is and why because I've
Yeah.
just done it so many times in person and the whole like process so many times. So anyway, you need to learn how to learn, and you know basically
Yeah.
you'll know what looks right. And I don't even need to like fish it anymore. Really, I'm like, I, I don't really hardly even need to fish it. I mean, I like to get on the water and fish it and look at it and stuff, but you don't want to blow up and burn fish like you're saying. You just need one or two, and then you're gone. So anyway, that's kind of my first one. Learn how to learn yourself, and don't. If you can get to that point where you don't need to anybody else, or I mean, obviously information, YouTube, internet, all that's like fine, but I just like to be like 100% my own self-contained. Like no one's out there on tournament day giving you advice and helping you. So if you fish with somebody else, and you'll probably dig into this maybe I'm sure later, but and start trying to rely on them and their information and what they're figuring out. It's like I told you this example on the on the phone earlier. It was like Tiger Woods doesn't take tips. He doesn't listen to anybody else's tip hardly about anything. I mean, why would he? He feels like his
Mhm.
knowledge would help them more than their knowledge would help him. So he's self-contained. It's just him and his coach, and that's like, or whoever, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something that is especially beginners, they're looking at a lot of like outside influences and, you know, like I'll talk about this in a later subject, but I think some people think that there's a magic bullet in this tournaments and that if they could just learn the magic bullet that somebody
Yeah.
else found out that they would win it themselves. But the reality of it is most of the time, if you tell a guy exactly how the tournament is going to be won, and you're like, the tournament is going to be won using this bait in this area, and
Hmm.
like the guy that won the tournament is probably still going to win the tournament because even if you have that knowledge, applying that knowledge is
Yeah.
it's a skill set in and of itself. And I think what you're saying is like concentrate on learning things genuinely based on your own experiences so that like you can self improve and you're not like constantly looking to outside things to try to gain knowledge from other people. And I'm not saying you can't learn from other people. You can, but fishing is one of those things. I think you kind of make your own style, and you can't
Yeah.
teach. You really genuinely you can teach like some fundamental stuff, but like fishing's so nuanced that like until you do it yourself, you're not going to truly believe. Like you're just not. And I think
Hmm.
confidence has a big role in that,
Yep.
and the only way to get, the confidence in your golf swing is to see it, to
Yeah.
hit the ball yourself and see it not slice or hook. It's like
Yeah.
you hit it straight. You can watch all the YouTube videos you want, you can do all the courses you want, you get all the coaching you want, but until you do it yourself, you're not going to have that confidence.
Yeah.
So yeah, I fully
That's a good one.
fully agree with you there. Um, all right, so moving on, my second one is master the art of practice. And
Ah.
um so practice is one of those things I think is like heavily like talked about. You
Yeah.
hear all the things from like sore lipping fish, kind of what we've already alluded to
Yeah.
of like,
Caught 95
like
inches and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's like,
93.
oh, and then you hear guys like, well, I don't put hooks on my baits when I go practice, and um, you know, I sort of have like the way I approach practice is like I'm trying to accomplish a couple things. One I already talked
Mhm.
about is like I just want to have confidence in what I'm doing the first day of the tournament. Like I just want to like I wanna, like, throw that bait with conviction because I know that they're going to be
Yeah.
on this type of place, this type of lure, and I'm, like, fairly certain that I'm gonna catch a couple good ones doing it. So I wanna kinda have that, uh, knowledge base. I also am trying to figure out where to start, so that's probably a couple things of, like, I wanna have an area that I'm launching at that, I have confidence in, and I think you and I think a lot about similar in that way where we're trying to go against the grain a little bit
Mhm.
of, like,
For
places
sure.
that maybe not everybody else is thinking about. Like, I remember we were at, the Susquehanna, and you kept thinking, like you kept saying, like, what's gonna separate me? What's gonna differentiate with me from the rest of the field? Because, like, dude, a lot of guys can go out there and catch 90 inches, which we saw in day one. Dudes were just, crushing 90 inches like crazy. So it's like, what's gonna get you 95 instead of 90,
Right.
Um, just going out there and just catching good fish isn't good enough. Like you
Yep.
have to do something just a little bit differently. And I have um absolutely try to do these like little things that are a little bit different. And I'm trying to in practice, I'm just trying to find what that is. Like what is that little
Mhm.
difference maker that I have? Is it a spot that I can get to? Like this past tournament, it was one of the things that I found was a spot, and we talked about it that I was like, nobody's gonna go here. Like, and if
Yeah.
they do, like they probably aren't going to go all the way in there. They're just going to go a little bit of part away. So
Mm-hmm.
like I had like a little area. Then it's like the last, that Susquehanna tournament, I was like, everybody's throwing whopper ploppers. And I got made fun of at the awards for saying I don't throw whopper ploppers because people were like laughing about it. But I was throwing a little finesse buzzbait instead of whopper plopper because I'm like, man,
Yeah.
there had to have been 80 or 90 guys, probably more than that, probably half the field that had that tied on. It's like, we'll fish at those, yes. But if they see 10 of them in a day, the ninth and 10th
Mm-hmm.
time, they're going to be like, nah, I'm not hitting that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm like, well, I'm going to throw something just a little bit different that kind of is doing the same thing, but it's a little more subtle. So practice for me is like I'm trying to establish an area where I can fish and I'm confident in on day one. I'm trying to get a general pattern of what the fish are doing at different times of the day. So I usually have like a morning pattern, a high noon pattern, late day pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get like 2 or 3 um people call it a milk run. I hate that term, but it is a little bit of like
Right.
you want like 4 or 5 spots where you're like, I'm gonna hit this area, and then when this bite dies, I'm going to the next area.
Right.
And it's funny. Some of my biggest fish I catch on the way to areas. It's kind of
Yeah.
hilarious how that works out. Where
You
you're
just
like,
can't help
all
but
right,
throw while you're moving. Yeah.
yeah, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go to my plan B, and I like go over here, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this looks pretty good. Let me throw a cast. Like, boom, I catch a 19. I mean, I've had that happen so many times I can't even begin to
Yeah.
think about it. But and the other thing is at the end of practice, that's when the day before, I'm getting pretty aware of like, I'm not fishing where I'm going to fish the day before the tournament.
Yeah.
Like,
For sure.
I might go there and I might like motor around and like maybe go further than I had been previously. And like, okay, this actually is good. I found another spot, but I'm not going to like fish that area
Yeah.
because you absolutely are. Sore lipping fish is a thing and pressure is a thing. Um,
Yep.
so that's kind of, just, and everybody has a different way that they practice. I'm sure you will kind of tell
Mm-hmm.
yours, but I practice the same way every time, you know, try to establish those things. And sometimes it helps me and sometimes it doesn't, especially when conditions change, and it can actually screw you
Mm-hmm.
if you have a great practice
Yeah.
and then
It,
like a
it can.
is in, then you have it in your head that they're doing
Yeah.
this. And then, so you do have to be aware of that. But a lot of times if conditions are stable, I think that
Though.
will help
Yeah.
you.
For sure. I love it. I mean, I've got a couple that kind of tie into that are we can kind of keep talking on similar topic here, but because you touched on them a little bit. Um, but one of them is practice the non-obvious areas to find, and I mean, like this could be your life scoping in the middle of a lake. You know what I'm saying? Like that in
Mhm.
an area that a hump or someone that no one's found. I always recommend practicing the non-obvious areas, like practice to try to find the magical bite, first, because it's how probably 75, if not more than that, tournaments are won. 75% of tournaments are won on something that's like crazy, what outlandish, either spot or whatever, like something just magical. It's like, holy cow, dude, that guy was just had a time out there, like having fun catching all those fish and just hammered them. Because and Brian Thrift's kind of the one who he put it, and I've always done this, but I never put it in words like he did. He was like, I'd go down the bank any day and catch fish. Just run the bank and go catch fish. But I'm looking for some offshore spot that nobody else has found, because that's the way you win a tournament. You know what I mean? You can cash a check, maybe just run to the bank, and his skill set's good enough to skip a jig under docks and do whatever it takes to fish the bank. I think when you get to the level that kind of we're fishing, that's what your mindset needs to be. I need to be practicing and finding something that is, like you were saying, that's either because it's hard to get to or a little off the wall, or it's because it's a little hidden because it's in 30-foot deep and it's a ditch or a drain or a rock pile that no one else has found. I'm always practicing for that, finding that. Always. I'm not just gonna, I'll just randomly go down and junk fish this bank. I mean, if I am doing a bank or whatever, there's a reason why I'm on that 100 yards or whatever, 200. I'm looking for this magical area. So and that's a quick one. There's not a lot to say there, which is good. So we can get in. And then I'll say another one since you kind of practice this kind of ties into practice. This is an interesting one that people, and I'm trying to do different stuff here, not the normal stuff. I would say figure out the winning score before you get there and where them, and then also on your pre-fishing, like online research and scouting, figure out where the majority of the content info is going to push most of the people, because an A spot isn't an A spot when 20 people are there. You're never going to win. It turns into a B spot or C spot. Every once in a while, you get somewhere that's super magical, and you could have 20 bass boats all in one area, and they're all just raking in fish. But that's not the norm, right? In kayak tournaments, especially. But what I mean by figure out the winning score, it's pretty simple. Most all these fisheries have had tournaments before.
Yep.
All different times of the year. It's all on the internet, and you can convert weight to length pretty darn easy. So I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but it might be like 100 inches is 25 pounds or something. You know what I'm saying? So you can convert weight to inches pretty easy. And you can, obviously, if there's kayak tournaments that already have inches, about, in quotes, about what you need. So during your practice, you need to be looking for, if your smallest fish, really needs to be 17 inches or whatever to hit this 95-inch limit you're trying to get, minimum, then you need to be finding fish that are 17, 18, 19 inches, or else you need to be getting out of that area ASAP.
Yeah, if you're catching all
Leave.
16s, it might make you feel good, but
Yeah.
those aren't
Go.
the fish, that you want.
Nope.
Especially, I mean, the Susky was a very like black and white example of that. It's like, dude, if they're under 18, like you don't
Yeah.
want to mess with them. I mean, you just
Yep.
don't.
You don't.
Your smallest fish better be 18. Like
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
just
You're trying to win, and you're trying to. We're talking about how to win here. We're not talking about how to, get in the top 25% or 40%. We're like talking about winning. So those two things, and that'll knock out two more on my list. Just again, practice it for that non-obvious magical spot area that could win that no one else has found first, and then worst case, you can always last day of practice or during the tournament, even if you still hadn't found it, go run the bank, or just go pre-fish again on another day, because if you're trying to win, and
yep.
then figure out that winning score where, and then the last thing was where the majority of people you think are going to be, and try to avoid those areas because they'll cannibalize each other, and it
Yeah,
happens every
for sure.
tournament. I can tell you where everyone's going to be pretty much just by the information that's online that we all find when we start doing searches.
Yeah. And those the bigger the tournament is, especially in those opens, the harder that's going to be, just because, like, dude, there's 224, 26 people at that Susky
Yeah.
tournament. It was really hard to find water that wasn't that there
Yep.
is hard to find a ramp where there wasn't 3 or 4 trucks at least. Like
Yeah.
it just was. So you had to be a little more creative with it. I think I get a little mixed with that because I have caught fish around other guys where they're not catching fish, and I think there's ways to differentiate what you're doing other than just where you're at. I think it's what you're
Oh yeah.
doing, and just because a guy's there fishing, you know, like a lake's a little different because the lakes are more spot oriented. They're like you're fishing this rock pile or this ledge or this brush pile, or this bank or whatever. But rivers tend to set up like where you can watch 4 or 5 guys blow through there fishing and they didn't catch anything, and you go right over there and you can catch fish that they didn't. Um, so I think there's like 2 ways you can sort of differentiate yourself, like where you're fishing
Mm-hmm.
and also what you're using and how
Yeah.
you're using it. And the higher level competition you get, the smaller those holes get, because
Mm-hmm.
guys, like you were saying, like Brian Thrift is like, dude, he can skip a jig underneath all the way to the back, and he's going, those guys aren't going to miss, they're going to hit most of the
Yeah.
time. So,
Exactly.
um, yeah, I think you're right. Um, Okay, so next one for me, my third one's this is one that there's an original sort of idea that gave me this topic, but it was I just put on here lone wolf, and what I mean by that is um, you and this may be somewhat controversial because it does take a little bit of the enjoyment out of it, I think, because I used to do the whole thing where I was like, "Let's buddy up and let's go fish a stretch and let's, talk and, do this
Hmm.
sorta, like, fun fish thing." And then I started realizing, like, that's really, hampering my ability to effectively either fish a tournament because fishing with someone during a tournament's really tough. I will never
Yeah.
do that again. Practicing with people, I feel like is a little more doable, but I still think it hampers your ability. And this is a good example. What Drew was saying is like if you pull up to a ramp and there's 20 guys there, like you don't need to go there. Like you need to find somewhere else. If you're with somebody, you're kind of already pot committed. You're kind of like, well, this is where we planned on
Hmm.
going. We dropped off a truck, we're
Hmm.
going here or whatever. If you're by yourself, like there is nobody telling you, "Well, I wanna go here. I wanna fish this." It's like, you can go wherever you want. You can fish for 10 minutes and then load up and leave, and there's nobody to call and be like, "Wait on, hey, oh, I need to take a piss," or, "I wanna
Yeah.
go here." You just kinda do whatever you wanna do, and I think there's a lot of freedom in that for me. I
Okay.
personally enjoy fishing by myself as much or more than I do fishing with other people, and I've learned to enjoy it because it's a pure,
Peaceful.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
it is like it's you and the fish.
You're
Like, that
focused.
is all it yeah, it's very, very focused, and, there's nobody distracting you, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
so but I practice by myself, and the other thing is, like, you don't have to share any of the stuff you find out with other people,
Exactly.
you can keep it all to yourself. Like, if you catch one on a, chatterbait or something on this wood, like, and you're with somebody, they're gonna see it.
Yep.
They're gonna see what you're using, they're gonna see where you're fishing, they're gonna see how big the fish is, and, like, if I'm fishing with somebody, I'm not gonna try to hide it, like, it's like it's pretty obvious,
Mhm.
unless you just wanna be a dick, and be
Yeah.
like, "Well, I'm not,
Yep.
sharing that stuff."
Yep.
So, I think it solves a lot of those problems by just fishing by yourself and not and it's pretty simple, just do it alone, and some people are gonna be
Yep.
like, "It's unsafe," "You should have a float buddy," or whatever, like, maybe, but it's way more effective. It
Hmm.
is,
I
you
agree,
know?
man. I mean, that's a good. What you said at the end was, you know, my kind of point on this was just. I mean, in La Crosse, Wisconsin, one time I had a spot that I found on the map that I knew where it was. I'm pretty sure I found a YouTube video that was the exact same area. I wanted to go check it out, and my buddy was already going with me, who I was staying with, and that was cool. I didn't mind. I'd had plenty of places I'd already found to fish, and I knew if he was coming with me that if we found fish there and he started catching fish, then you're kind of leaving the door open to where like he's gonna probably, you know, say, "Oh, this is great. I'm gonna fish here in the tournament." Well, another one of our roommates said, "Hey, do you guys mind if I tag along?" I'm like, "Sure, sure." I didn't even think about it. This is kind of when I learned this lesson. We get there and he's the one that like, I mean, I was catching fish and he saw it and then he started kind of figuring it out and catching them too next to me and he didn't have anything else in practice he'd found. He's like, "I'm just gonna go there." I'm like, "Well, that's," and he wanted to go there first, and I had another place I want to go first and then go there second. I'm like, "Well, now he's going to be
Yeah,
there
you
in the
just
morning
burn
first."
that
So I just
spot,
burned that
dude.
whole spot. I just took him, and I can't also like you can't say yes to him and then tell him no, he can't go there. Does that make sense? You can't say yes, you can go
Yeah,
practice here, and then all of a sudden he wants to fish there and say, "Well, now no," because then you've just wasted his whole day. You should have
yep,
told him, "Well, yes, you can come practice here with us, but if you catch him, I just want to let you know if I, want to fish this area, I'm gonna kind of like ask that." I put you on it, and those fish. This is literally the spot that like I think there's a school
mhm,
up here, and you can't. If you're cool with that, then come on. Maybe you can learn something that can help pattern it somewhere else on the watershed, right? But most people would say no to that, and then they wouldn't be there. So yeah, you got to watch out for that for sure, because it messed up my entire plan of the tournament because he was already there with
well,
who
and
knows who else could have found it.
if I wanna fun fish with somebody, like, and I'm practicing for 3 days, let's say, I just use the first 2 days, like, I'm by myself the first 2 days,
Yeah.
and then I'm finding what I know, it's like, "Alright, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going." I don't care what I do on the last day. Let's
Last
just
day.
go wherever and do something fun.
Mhm.
And I mean, I guess there's a possibility you discover something that day too, but at the same time, it's like I already have in my mind, like I know it. Now, if I have a crappy first couple days of practice, I'm not going to do that. But if I have
Yeah, yeah.
good practice and I'm very confident in what I'm doing, that third day, it's like,
Yep.
let's go have some fun. So,
Yep.
um, but yeah,
Yeah, man. Should I go on to another one here?
yeah, go to your next one, man.
Um, so my brother used to drive a truck, big rig truck, for a few years, and he always would say to give yourself, like, truckers are always supposed to give themselves an out because I mean, everybody is when you're driving. You've only got, they got 12 inches on either side of the lane, and if crap hits the fan in front of you, you always have to know, like, where am I going to stay safe and to salvage this and not get in this pile up and this and just spin out, burn out, and like for us in a fishing tournament, kind of goes along with your plan thing, but it's basically like, be very conscious of that, because the reality is, if you can increase your floor in a tournament, like on the first day, especially if you can increase your floor, then you cannot get yourself out of it. You know what I mean? Like, if you have a bad first day and it's a 2-day tournament, you're never winning. But you need to always
Mhm,
have an out, a way you can go and still get like 85 inches or 90 inches just to stay in the game. Because winning in tournaments, yeah, we're talking about trying to win, but the reality is, winning in our sport is kind of just cashing a check. That's most people's definition of it. So to keep yourself in the game and to give yourself an out, you always need to, like, I like to use the Tacoma outboard analogy you talked about earlier. Like, even though think this is first my game plan, the first area I'm going to start here, but if a bunch of people show up that I don't know pre-fish there and also found the same thing, or water levels or temperatures or clarity conditions changed, where's my quick out and to go to another spot to salvage that day? And so it means I'm probably not going to a spot that, at my first spot, it's a 3 mile paddle or pedal to get all the way there and all the way back to the ramp, because then I got to go all the way back. You know what I'm saying? Potentially, if I know that area has a potential to bust, and I don't know what I have truly. If you're doing our theory on, you catch one or two fish, you're out, or you just see how, I just kind of know when an area looks right, I just know they're there. You can either see them by standing up if the water's clear, you can see the fish are there. Whatever reason, it bails, unless like most of the spots I go to first, if I'm going 3 miles to a spot, 4 miles somewhere far, I better know I can spend the whole day there. I guess is what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Like, you
mhm,
gotta, it. But most of the time, you just want to give yourself an out and not do that. And give yourself a way to just get back and get out and go to your next spot with a good majority of the day, and then possibly even your C spot and your D spot. I mean, La Crosse and Lake Dardanelle, La Crosse, I've moved as much as 5 or 6 times in the truck. It's kind of wild and crazy to move that much, but you got to do what you got to do, because in practice, like I said, I really don't know fully what I've got when you only catch one. You catch one decent fish, you leave. You assume there's more big ones there, and usually there are, but you don't always know. So just give yourself an out. And I will say that, to kind of tag on with this, a smart thing to do is to go to, if you're going to take a big risk on somewhere kind of far away, I kind of want to end my day there. I know I'm
yeah,
sort of counteracting what I just said, or start my day there, because you get that 30-minute window before lines in to travel somewhere, so you're not burning. But typically, when I'm using that, it's because I know that area has got enough fish, or stuff nearby has enough fish for the whole day, and I'm not going to need that out. My out is the other stuff in the area. It's not getting back to the truck as the out. You know what I'm saying? So,
mhm.
and then, or kill your day there. If you're going to go somewhere super far, that way you don't have to waste the time getting back to your truck during tournament hours. You can do it after lines out. So always be thinking about when crap hits the fan, which, like you said, it always does in a tournament. It never just works out like you think. Where you're going to go to save your day one, so you can still recalibrate what happened to to smash them on day two and still win the event or cash a check.
Yeah, and I think another way to even say what you're saying is just, like, be willing to adjust
Yeah.
because it is you inevitably, man, you're gonna have to adjust in a tournament. Like, rarely do you just like, "Yep, I'm gonna go here, boom, my fish are there." That's just not how it usually goes.
No.
I think I have had tournaments like that, and it's very nice. but most of the time
Oh, it is.
I'm pretty stressed out, because
Yeah.
I'm like, you got all these scenarios running through your head, and
Yeah.
in a in a local tournament, where there might be 40 guys or whatever, it's a little bit different because I mean, I'm not like shooting down some of the local talent because there's definitely talented guys,
Right.
but I think
Oh, yeah.
there's like a lot of that field is like, you're gonna probably cash a check if you're good, no matter what. In those bigger tournaments, like it is a different level of like sort of like stress. Like, and it's like, hey, I'm gonna have to put up a really good limit in order to do well, and being willing to adjust is like you better have it. Like Drew said,
Yeah.
like it's funny
And
you
have the
say that plan B,
Yep.
plan C, dude. I
You
have
better have
like
the gonads to do it. That's what it really takes. I've driven as far as like an hour
yeah,
and a half on Lake Champlain, like in the middle of the tournament, just killed an hour and a half to drive. Like now, granted, I had like, it helps when you have 90 something inches already and you're just kind of like, which is another good point. When you do crush them early on day one or day two, whatever, it does gives you the ability to take bigger gambles when you really need that, you know,
mm-hmm,
especially day one though. So you can utilize that information for day two. Um, so yeah, you got to be willing
yeah.
to take the gamble and do that stuff. And
Yeah, there's
yeah,
there's taking gambles as part of it for sure. You know, I don't.
yep,
It is hard for me to load up and
yeah.
get in
Most
the
people don't want
car
to do it.
multiple times because it
Yeah,
takes
yep,
just to load up. Like, I mean, you're talking about 20
yeah,
minutes, like just to load up and then drive wherever you got it. And then you got to unload, which is probably another 10, 15 minutes. So, like, that's time when your lure's not in the water. But I also think about, it's like, where am I going to? Like, if I'm fishing like what I consider unproductive water, yeah, I might catch one or two, like, or maybe an unexpected fish, but like, I'm gonna go to a really like
yeah,
high percentage area that
exactly.
I'm like, and you shouldn't go. That's where practice plays into it. You should have multiple areas like that where
Yes,
you're like,
it's high percentage, and you're going for a
yeah,
reason. It's okay, and I've got it dialed in. You can get it pretty quick. Like with my, I use the Crescent Shoaly, man. I've got that thing. I'm literally, I'm very minimalistic. Don't bring a ton of gear. I back it down. I'm in the truck. I'm out, and like it's less than 5 minutes that I'm like loaded up and gone. My rod's strapped down with the rod saver on the front hatch, so they stay in there. Everything, all the stuff stays in there. I even have the male and female parts of a cam strap. I've got a like cut a cam strap in half, right?
Drew's
Think about
got
this.
like Z-Man baits
Yeah,
flying
yeah,
off his truck into the
just
road.
probably. But like that's on my truck on the two corners. When your truck bed goes like drops down, you got like the little hooks on the each corner, right? So you could loop a cam strap around your kayak and do all that thing. But I actually cut one in half, so I tied one that doesn't have the cam on it. It's just the strap, and it just the one end, right? And then the other end is
Yeah.
tied on. It's got the cam piece. So I literally just throw the boat in there and I under the handle through the other one and just pull it together. There's not even the looping I have to do. I just put one strap on it. And I mean, I have another hook I could clip on with my winch if I need to on the back, but one just holds it fine. So I just go with where I'm going with one strap and then
Yeah.
5 minutes, dude. I'm
If you
telling you, and unloading is
if you
literally
can
5 minutes.
yeah, yeah, if you can do that, more power to you. I don't have it down quite like that. I tried to do that the last tournament because I was like, I'm probably gonna be moving some here, but
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The Susquehanna's so big. I feel like
No, you don't need.
you
Yeah,
don't
hardly ever
necessarily have to
move
load
there.
up. There's one spot that I wish I would have went to, but I never went there during practice. Just like I've every time I've been there, I've caught a 19.
Hmm.
Like, there has to be a couple of
Oh
fish
yeah,
waiting right here.
that's in the yeah. It's always in the back of your head. Like that's what's annoying about the Susquehanna. Like I've caught like 19 plus inch fish from every ramp I've put in there. It's like in my head, I'm
Yeah,
thinking, I need to be there. I need to be there. It's like so hard to like figure
and,
out. It's why I
yeah,
freak out at that tournament. I'm like, am I making the right decisions? Because I know every ramp has
yeah,
giants, like, but anyway, what else do you have? I have one more,
yeah. I
and
have
you've
2
got
more,
one. You have two
so
more. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, so the next one for me, 2, 3 oh, I actually have 6. I don't know how I got that.
Like a
Um,
bonus.
I know. So my next one is manage your time. Learn to manage your time,
Yeah.
and this is like can be a really quick conversation or point, but essentially, like, I think a lot of guys that don't fish tournaments, they're like, "Oh, I went out and had a great day," and I had 96 inches, and like, yeah, like you did, but like, did you stop fishing at 2:30 because like that's when the tournament ends? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I like you don't think about that, but like 2:30, like which is when like a typical summer tournament is like 6 to
Yeah.
2:30 or 6:30 2:30 whatever. It's 8 hours of fishing. Like you're stopping in the middle of the day. That's usually like the worst time to fish during the day. It's like high sun. Like you do not get to fish that like
Yeah.
six
Evening.
o'clock to 8 o'clock evening by it. Just you don't. So your morning time, I have when the tournament starts, for one, like I waste no time. I'm gonna make sure I'm at the spot that I want to fish, like first light, and I am like ready to make a cast, like I set a timer on my phone. So as soon as my watch
Mm-hmm.
buzzes, like I'm making that first cast. Because I mean, how many times
Yep.
have you made a first cast in a tournament and caught a nice one that ended up being on your five? Like I mean, I would
Yeah.
say half the
Mm-hmm.
tournaments I fished, my first five casts are producing some
Yeah.
of my fish that I'm keeping the whole tournament. Like it
Yeah.
just
It's your best
is.
spot. Yeah.
Yeah. So making that sort of those that first like hour and a half, really until the sun's kind of up, like that's kind of phase one. You need to make sure you're like not wasting time during that. And I will not submit a fish during that time.
Yeah.
It cracks me up how guys, you'll see them, they
Yeah.
catch a big one in the morning and they're like, you see them fiddling with their phone, like, dude, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
you are wasting so much like precious time. Like, do that at
Yeah.
1:30 when you've been fishing all day. Like,
Yeah.
you
Or
know,
when you're moving from one spot to the next, you're just motoring or whatever.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or in my case,
Ma-
maybe I've submitted some fish while I was driving, maybe or may have not have. I don't,
yeah,
but
making every second count
yeah,
in that specific time frame, um, and then really like managing time throughout the day, like I've seen you, chug a can of chunky soup
yeah,
before. Like,
yeah,
I don't eat lunch. I'm not stopping. Now, I have a couple times when I have a super good morning and I got five, and I'm like, it's actually one of the best feelings in the world. If you have
oh
like,
yeah,
you have a really good limit, and you're like, dude, I can actually eat lunch today.
yeah.
you
You're
know?
pulling out your wings that
Yeah,
are in your tin foil, aluminum foil
I
from the
know.
night before from the restaurant. They're the
Yeah.
best wings you've ever had, cold on the river with 97 inches in the.
I know.
You know,
Yeah, that's such a good feeling to do that. I mean, I have a hard time even drinking water when I'm fishing tournaments because I'm so
yeah,
like
same
dialed in
here.
and
Me
focused. Like
too.
I'm just like I'll start cramping. I'm like, I gotta drink some, water.
Yeah,
But I just make every second count. Like manage your time. I usually like have timers throughout the day set on my
yep,
phone, so I know of like at 11 o'clock, I'm like, all right, this is like the time where I'm like, I need to reevaluate what I'm doing. Like, and a lot of that has to be with like, okay, this spot has shade at this certain time of day.
yeah,
I want to be there at this time because this is like
yeah,
when the fish will probably move into there. So when that alarm goes off, I'm like, all right, time to bail. And
yep.
I don't necessarily always do that because if I'm actively catching fish, you're obviously not going to move. But a lot of times it's like,
Hmm.
it's been 30 minutes since I got a bite. Like, time to go, you
Yeah,
know? Um,
yep. It's
so
true, man.
managing your time is so important.
I love
So,
that one. That's a good one. That's a good one. I same thing. We've got multiple timers set sometimes if and I know my route, how long it's going to take me. It's all mapped out to drive to from this spot to this spot. I know my 10 minutes from loading and unloading. I factor that in. So I know, you just have it all planned out for the if you need to do it, the what if, if the crap hits the fan. So I love it, man. That's a really, really good one. Time. And the word efficiency is what I would put in there. Just being efficient and is
yeah,
possible. I mean, it's how I use this analogy so many times. People are probably tired of me saying it, but when sports start getting like such a fine line, there's such a fine line, like to win in any sport, and more people that do it, the better they get information. YouTube, it's going to get finer and finer. There's a point when Olympic swimmers shave the body hair, off because it gained them a tenth of a second or 2/10 for the course of the entire race. And now they wear those suits or whatever, but still, The point was they did at one point shave their hair for that reason, and that's the difference in winning and losing, even in our sport. So every little moment, chugging the can of soup could be the difference in 2 casts or 3 casts that, I ate food a little quicker than I would have, and that could be the difference in the tournament. You do that, you save time, and that way, over the course of the whole day, you save 4 or 5 casts here. You save some casts because you didn't submit your fish right away, and you didn't waste time. You could do it when you're transporting or driving, and it starts to add up to like, dude, I just got 100 extra casts on somebody else, and that what could
Yeah.
that what could
It's
that be? So
it
yeah, I love it. That's a good one,
absolutely
man.
yeah, managing time is so
Yeah.
underrated, for sure. Um,
Uh,
what's your last one?
I've got I've got a last one, the 2 bonus ones that we don't have to talk about because they're just like I'm just saying them. But try to my last one is try to see the entire fishery if you can. Like as long as on your pre-tournament, Google Maps, Google Earth Pro, your pins, your waypoints, of course, are I assume they're going to be all different parts of the lake. I would just encourage you to. I drive around the whole lake and look at it all the rivers and creeks. I want to know what clarity this water coming out of this creek is and how healthy it looks compared to that one. That also dictates how healthy that arm of the lake is, right? Because that's the water that's feeding it. So I
Mhm.
kind of wanted to see all the lake if I can, because if you buy the first house that the realtor shows you, yeah, it's probably gonna look great. You think it's awesome, but is that the house you would have bought had they shown you 20? Probably not. As long as they're all in the same area, same school district, with all the things you were looking for, right? Probably not the first house that you're gonna buy. It's probably like the best deal might be who knows which one, but if you don't see the whole fishery, then how do you know? And take that knowledge, which was my point from number one, learn how to learn yourself. So learn what's good yourself because you know it's good because you've learned it and taught yourself and proved it by catching the fish, right? And of course, you could obviously learn some of that stuff online. We talked about too, and you take it in, but you've proven it yourself, and so then you know what looks good when you've circled the whole lake, and you know what is right because the satellite image can't always tell everything, and it isn't current. So you're getting current data, and people just don't take the time and the discipline to do it, to round the whole thing. And now it doesn't always mean I do that. Like on 10 killer when I won the championship for Bassmaster, I knew I was doing that river the whole time because that lake didn't set up for my style. Nowhere else in the lake. There was maybe a couple other small creeks that didn't have a lot of volume to them that maybe had some fish in them, but I kind of knew I was all in on that river. So I don't always do it, but usually I will like see the whole lake, just like a bass boat angler wants to. They usually drive their boat around the whole lake, during their
Yep.
practice, a couple different ramps. They want to see it all because you just don't know, you know, what really stands out as unique and different until you've seen it all. And that's where fish like to live in those, there's a bunch of lily pads and there's a lay down in the lily pads. That's what's different about that group of lily pads. It's got a piece of wood in it, right? So fish in a 30,000 foot perspective, it's the same thing. They want to, the groups of fish, sometimes the biggest groups and the best magical areas we're trying to find are certainly in these areas that are just unique and different, that only occur in a couple places, maybe that entire fishery watershed. So anyway, that's my last one. And just to encourage you guys, a couple bonus ones, just fish your style and keep honing it instead of trying to feeling the pressure of marketing, with baits and lures, to figure out all the latest techniques and tactics and how to use them. Because we, as non-pros that are not on the water 250 days a year, we don't have the time to really even figure those out, understand them, and then even know when in a tournament to utilize this drop shot versus a let's say hover or a Ned on the bottom or whatever. Like it's like those things are so similar. You know what I'm saying? Like it takes so much time for them to understand I need a Nico right now and not a drop shot. You know what I'm saying? And we don't have
Yep.
that time to really figure it. So hone your own style. That's kind of what I'm known for. Power fishing, moving fast baits, and going to the water that works best with those straight braided line kind of baits that I use: swim baits, spinner baits, buzz baits, chatter baits, that kind of stuff. And just keep honing it, because while everyone else is confusing themselves, trying to figure out all those other baits, and they never even know when to use them most of the time properly, I'm getting better at what I'm good at and what my personality suits. So, and then the last one I had was kind of a bonus, was stay centralish to the middle of your kind of like watershed that's in bounds. if you can. Stay central and stay comfortable, like at a good Airbnb with a carport, places to rig and set up if it's raining, a good bed. And if you stay central, you'll have all your options open for where you're going to go. If you stay on one side of the lake and it's an hour and a half or 2 hours to get to the other side, you're probably not going to want to fish the other side of that lake, and that could be where the winning fish are. But if you stay central, you have
Yeah,
that. Everything's an
that's a
option.
super nuanced thing as far as and guys that do, like, the camping rooftop
Yeah.
tent sort of stuff have an advantage where they can sleep at
Yep.
ramps, so
True.
they can kinda, like, be even more versatile that way. Um, yeah, dude, that's
Couple
really
bonuses.
good
Yep. Yep.
yeah, that's really good stuff. So my last one, and I talked to you about this when we were on the Susky, but, this is gonna sound even more simple than have a plan, but, um, it's, fish hard, and what I mean by that is and I'll use an example. Um, so I have had so many tournaments that mentally, I'm like, I have no confidence in what I'm doing because the bite shut off, but I continue to fish hard. And when I mean by fish hard, I mean like you're making like accurate casts. You're not just like throwing in an area, like you're trying to put your spinnerbait, you're trying to bump it off logs. Like, and that
Yeah.
takes a lot. Like you might make
Focus. Yeah.
five, 10,000 casts in a day. So like it's easy to get fatigued and sort of like make a kind of a half-ass cast. But when you're locked in and you're fishing hard all day long, I've had days where it's like, dude, I haven't had a bite for 45 minutes, and all of a sudden, boom, I got a 20 because I made that cast in the
Right.
exact spot that it needed to be. And I think that's one of the like I think there are two ways that tournaments can be won. There's probably a lot more than that, but in my mind, it's like the magic bullet thing where you're like, there's a guy that found something that, nobody else is doing. There's also times when that magic bullet just doesn't present itself for whatever reason.
Yep.
Like maybe the fish are like really stubborn or they're like fired up. That's actually a really bad time to fish a tournament when
Yeah.
everybody's catching them.
Yep.
And it's like the person that basically like the Susky was a good example, dude. It's like, dude, that's like
Whoever
first through
executes.
20th, there was like this tiny little margin of error between the top guy and the 20th guy.
Yep.
Because everybody was catching him and there were so many fish. And I think a lot of it is like people give up in the middle of the day. They just
Yeah.
like they kind of like, oh, I don't get I mean, I've literally seen guys like leave in the middle of a tournament.
Yeah.
And like you just never know, man. I mean, when I was a kid, I was in high school and me and my dad were fishing this national tournament trail. It's Fishers of Men. I don't know if you've heard of
Mhm.
that. It's like
Yeah.
a
Oh, yeah.
Christian
Yep.
based
Yep.
tournament trail. And we did okay. My dad's got a little bit more of a like old school guy. So I was a little bit cornered into what he was doing, but it was the middle of the day. We had like one keeper in the boat. This is it, one keeper, and I was kind of like almost mailing it in, but we pulled up to this flat, and my dad loves to throw a buzzbait. That's like his thing. He used to throw the accent double bladed
Mhm.
buzzbait,
Oh,
and
yeah.
th- th- throw on this flat. It's 45 minutes before the tournament's over, and we got to make a run to the ramp to get there. And it was like we pulled up like first cast, boom, he catches like a 4-pounder. We get in the live well. I throw in there, boom, I catch like a 3.5. And like, dude, we
Nice.
had a limit in like a 20-minute period, dude. We went from having one fish that was, I think it was a big one, it was like 5 pounds, to having like 20 pounds. And then we're like, oh crap, we actually have to get back to the ramp because we have a
Yeah.
limit. And it was real rough out that day, and I remember. But my point is like I've had tournaments like that where it's like the last 15 minutes,
Yep.
like the last 15 minutes of the tournament, it's like you catch one that makes a difference between you either sucking and cashing a check or cashing a check and winning it. Like
Yep.
you absolutely those fish. And if you talk to anybody who's done well in tournaments, they'll tell you the same thing. Like there's something about that last like hour of the tournament, and I don't know what it is because at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you would think like that's like a really bad time, but dude, I don't know why. Like just I've had tons of times where I've just caught my biggest fish in that, and I don't usually catch a bunch of them, but I catch like
Mhm.
a kicker in that last like,
Yeah.
30, 45 minutes. And if you're fishing hard, like that's the only way you're going to catch this fish. If you mailed
Yep.
in and you're just kind of like looking at your phone, making some,
Yeah, it's
checking the
right.
leaderboard, like you're
Dude,
not going to
it's
catch them.
it's you guys kind of found the you know, you kind of won that tournament by finding the magical spot. Like the
Mhm.
area like that just was right. And you know what I mean? Like what you're saying is it's like funny because you can find that spot in the tournament by just practicing in the tournament, quote unquote, just you don't know, you're still looking for it, and you can still find it in the tournament. And it takes 15, 20, 30 minutes to literally get right, go from calling up whatever you had 70 something inches to 95 and winning the tournament if you find that spot. Now, some people already found that spot in practice, and that's why they're in the morning, they're already boom up there. But then, like you said, I do agree. There are tournaments that no one really finds that. That's why I was like saying, I feel like 75% of the tournaments are won by something that's like that. That just this this guy like, and then everyone else kind of falls in line as the best of the junk fishermen who
Yeah.
didn't quite figure that out, and they didn't have it. It wasn't as easy. Like I guess what I'm saying that most people's story is like, I mean, I know it's not easy, but for them it was pretty darn easy. Like they were already, like you're saying, eating food, chilling, they're relaxing, ordering pizza, back at the ramp, and everyone else had to work all day to get up to even close to getting second or third. That's the best of the junk fishermen, the best of the, and like what
Yeah.
you're saying is you can still catch those last couple fish, even just if you're the best of the rest that they were just, or no one found the magical spot. You could win the tournament by staying in the game mentally, because a lot of people are going to bail, like you said, when it's hot, summertime, and it doesn't take long at all, and you can get
Yeah.
right. So that's a good one
I
to end on for sure.
Yeah, and I have one little bonus and we'll go, but one of the things that it's actually a really powerful one is post-tournament analysis.
Yeah.
And like I say this because if you go fishing like in general, just like fun fish, like you might think you had a good day. But in reality, like, you may have had the fish may have just been fired up that day, and you just had a good day. Everybody had a good day. In a tournament, it's one of the few times that you can objectively look at it and be like, "How good was my day
Yeah.
really?"
Compare. Yeah.
And if you have a clunker, it gives you the ability to not only see what you did wrong, but also figure out what those guys did right that you didn't figure out.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like if you look at fishing as like this big encyclopedia in your brain where you're like kind of storing different scenarios, and it's always going to be convoluted because no condition or water is going to be exactly the same from year to year. It's always going to be a little bit different. But you can say, oh, hey, in July on the Susquehanna, when the water levels were this and the temperature was this was the winning like
Mm-hmm.
technique. And then you can say, well, if I encounter that again, this is what I'm going to do. Or at least like that's going to be in my
Yeah.
repertoire.
Give it a shot.
Um,
Yeah.
it's like when Ewing Minor won it a couple years ago, or Nolan won it.
Nolan.
Ewing won
Yeah.
it this year. When
The bug.
Nolan won it, yeah, when he was fishing that gizmo, it's like, dude, that was like not on my radar. Like I
Yeah.
was not like I had thrown some stuff like that, but like I wasn't thinking about throwing it. But then it clicked because I was like, well, I saw bass eating dragonflies all day. Like there
Yeah.
were
It
tons of
clicks. Yeah.
dragonflies on that water, and I was like, it clicked, and I'm like, okay, well now I know, and I trust me, when we did that, the last Susquehanna tournament, I went right back to that spot and threw a gizmo for 4 hours, and I eliminated it. It wasn't the winning. It was
Yeah.
not the winning formula, but like I went back there, and because I did that post tournament analysis, and I was like, this area with this bait won it last time,
Could
and
play.
it was
Yeah.
different. The water wasn't quite as low as it was that year. You know,
Right.
fish moved out more into the main river. They weren't like back in these little, kind of shaded pools. So that was but post tournament analysis is a really big thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like that,
man.
man. That's a good one to end on. I've always said this too. It's like your all of your tournaments. Like if you go to my website, drewgregory.com. I mean, I don't really talk about that, but I have that site. It's up. You can actually click on my tournament history. So my sponsors and whoever, fans, friends, whoever can check it out. I have all my tournaments on a spreadsheet there listed. You can scroll and see them and keeping up with that data. But I've always said to everyone that tournament fishing, all tournaments combined are one big tournament in the sense that when you learn something from a previous tournament, it's not a waste. You had a bad tournament, didn't go well, whatever. You've learned, and now that helped you get higher in the next tournament because you took something you learned. So it's all like one big tournament. You're really just trying to get this floor, your floor just up. It's like fantasy football, right? You want the guys with the good floor every week,
Yep.
So and then they'll pop, of course, here and there, and you'll win one. So individual sports are tough to win. Only one person wins, so it's very hard. You just got to keep that floor as high as possible,
Yeah.
and it's all
Yeah.
one big tournament. So
In winning a fishing tournament, I think a lot of guys look at fishing tournaments and equate them to sports, and I think that's fair to do. But at the same time, there's an element of luck in fishing that is not
yeah,
in basketball and golf, and
yeah,
I think sometimes it gets a little bit dismissive because of that. Because the greatest guy to ever fish bass tournaments, Kevin Van Dam, like he wasn't winning every tournament. Like he was doing consistently
yeah,
well. And I think that's why Angler of the Year is probably a more coveted
right.
thing to get than like winning in the Bassmaster Classic, because it takes consistency over time, and anybody can win the classic if
Yeah, the right
the
conditions.
sort
It
of
could be their home
yeah,
lake, could be whatever. Yeah, it could just all
yeah,
fall in line.
conditions align.
No, you're
So
right.
I do think, fishing is a lot like in those big national tournaments or, at the highest level, winning is tough. Like you said, winning, I think, is just cash and check. Like if you're net positive in what your entry fees versus your winnings are at the
Hmm.
end of the year, like you can feel pretty good about what you're doing, you know?
Right.
Um, but, yeah, I think that's a great podcast. I think a lot of guys are going to glean some
Yeah,
valuable information from that.
I think
So
so, man. I'll end on this too. I have a theory that about when you get to levels that are really good anglers are there, like you're saying, they're top anglers, they're all hitting the same, making the same good cast and all that. I really do think that and there's probably like 20% of us that are on the winning fish spots, area, all that stuff, and then it comes down to, like you're saying, like 10% of those 20% miss the fish, they miss the bite, and then the fish doesn't follow back up. It doesn't. They kind of miss the strike, and then another or 5%, they get the fish on to win and they come off. Happened to me in the Susky this year. I know you lost
yeah,
some too. And then
yeah,
another 5%, everything works out. They found the winning fish. They hooked all the fish. They didn't lose any. They executed. And then it just literally just comes down to, okay, yours was 19 and 3/4, mine was 19 and a half. And this one, there's like, it just comes down to like that. So there's a lot definitely goes into this whole thing. And hopefully you guys learned something. And your last point, being staying focused and in the game. Hopefully, you guys stay focused and we're in the game. We're at an hour and 20 minutes. So those of you who were and stuck around, I think you probably learned something pretty cool. And we'll see you at the Wisconsin River Fest if you make it.
yeah, dude. I'm game. I'm excited for that. I'll be there on Wednesday, practicing Wednesday and Thursday, and yeah, man. I'll see you at least at the opening ceremonies, if not before then. And
Cool.
yeah, dude. Looking forward to seeing What Boy Nation show out. I know there's at least a handful of guys that I've talked to that are going, and yeah, should be a good time. So,
Yeah. Can't wait, man. All right. See
uh,
you guys. Thanks.
free the fighter.